Building a budget. In building a budget, you start at the very base level, your mission statement. That's a statement of introduction as it relates to the school's goals and philosophies, about the nature of the learners, learning, and the purpose of the school. The mission statement is what everything else flows from. All decisions that you make must flow from your mission statement. The next thing that you'll put in your budget document is the budget narrative. This really is an executive summary. It's that narrative that gives a written overview of the process that you use for developing your budget. Who was involved in that process? It provides a description of the successes and the challenges that face the school. The revenue for public schools is derived from three distinct areas: state, local, and federal government. The state provides approximately 45%. Again, that's the national average. The local jurisdiction provides 45%, and the federal government provides 10%, and in some cases even less, in terms of the total revenue for the local schools. Now, the sources for the private schools, as you can see, the majority of income is derived from tuition. Then you have items such as tuition grants, donations, perhaps parish subsidies, interest income, and then there's other income. Things such as student activities, athletic activities, textbook income. Those are the critical things to remember. And when you're building your budget, you have to look very closely at the source of revenue. How will you get your money? And then the next part of the discussion is, what will you spend that revenue on? The next item is identifiers, and in particular, enrollment identifiers. Here you're looking at items such as total school enrollment, enrollment by grade, enrollment by religious affiliation, if you are in a private or Catholic school, faculty needed by grade or subject, and the support staff needed. The next thing you need to have is a chart or table that looks at your future enrollment. You need to look at the students that are returning, students that are not returning, identifying reasons for students not remaining at your school, looking at the number of new students coming in and the reasons for their enrollment. And also, and this is a critical element, are there any local community trends? For instance, are there large corporations that are either coming into the area or that are leaving your area that might impact your enrollment and the students attending your school or their ability to afford your school? Again, you'll see in this chart that it's very easy to see that our current enrollment, again, by grade, all the way down. You'll also see that the total enrollment for 2016-2017 would be 352. And you'll see that I'm stabilizing that as we go along. Now, the other thing you'll notice is total classes. Well, you'll see that there are 8. And the average class size. That's also important because it says my average class size is 33. That seems to be a lot for some schools. For other schools, it might not be that large. But in your budget documentation, you need to make sure that it's very clear. You need to do analysis of academic or improvement plan in your school. That means you have to start with the instructional program needs. What do you need to ensure the highest quality of learning? What sources of data did you use? Perhaps you're using test scores. Perhaps you're using a survey that was distributed to students as well as parents. Or perhaps a survey to alumni. What are your most significant academic needs? And then What are the costs associated with the actions that you need to take? And then you need to say, these are all the things that I need to do. These are my highest priorities in terms of the academics at my school. The next thing is you need to look at the personnel, support staff, the teaching staff, administrators, maintenance staff. You need to basically identify the number of individuals that you need and also include a justification. Why do you need X number of support personnel? Why do you need X number of administrators? Oftentimes we just assume that because we did it last year, that that's what we need next year. Not necessarily. And I think that's a crucial point that is often overlooked. It can also lead to major problems in your budget if you are overstaffed in certain areas. The next, you need to break down the categories by position. Now, this is what scares a lot of people. Now, this is for those individuals that you have in your school. Now, notice there by position. Now, this might be a document that you would give to your school board, would give to a very limited number of individuals. Why? Because of confidentiality. But what you need to see is that what are the salaries for each one of these positions, and what are you anticipating those salary increases being as you go farther down the road. Teaching salaries. Now again, in this particular case, you'll see we don't have a preschool teacher. So we have kindergarten teacher, but we only have one. But we have one first grade teacher, one second grade teacher. But then you get all the way down here to the 8th grade, well, we have 2 teachers. And then again, you'll see all the positions. Why is this important? Because you need to make sure that your budget is allocated based upon the personnel that you anticipate for the coming year. Now, could that change? Absolutely. Because a teacher might leave and you might need to hire someone that costs more money. Or perhaps you're going to hire somebody that requires less of a salary. But again, you need to have hardcore data, not just simply what you think or simply taking your salary budget and multiplying it by X%. That's not going to give you a true number because of the fact that the salary scale is different according to the steps for most schools. Budget allocations. Now, when you're looking at budget allocations, things that you look at, faculty salaries, substitute salaries, extracurricular stipends, those are just a few that you need to make sure that you include. Again, notice the substitute salaries. How do you handle substitutes? Now, in your school, you might say, we don't hire substitutes. Well, what happens if you have a faculty member that needs to go out based upon FMLA? You're required, if they have enough leave, you're going to be required to pay their salary. Do you have anything built in to your budget to ensure that you're not going to break the budget because you have to hire a long-term sub or even a short-term sub? Administration salaries, support staff salaries. Another area is payroll taxes and benefits. These are often overlooked by most teachers, but you see them in your pay stub, perhaps, but when you're doing the budget, you need to ensure that you have allocated the proper amount for FICA, for the medical insurance, dental insurance, retirement, life insurance, unemployment compensation, workers' compensation. Then you get to the instructional materials section where you're talking about classroom materials, line items for library expenses, guidance expenses, testing expenses, textbook expenses, professional development, and other educational expenses. Again, this is just a brief summary. You might have a lot more in your particular school. Again, high schools have a lot more because the instructional expenses are broken out by department. If you have an athletic department, that's another area that must be included in terms of expenses. Administrative expenses. Don't overlook these. When do you mail things out to parents, to local feeder schools? What advertising do you do? What brochures do you publish? Do you have any kind of promotional activities, special events? What about meetings, faculty meetings, parent meetings, office supplies, printing? What about that big copy machine that sits in the office? There's a monthly charge that you are assessed. What about postage? What about professional contracted services? What about professional development? Internet services? Again, just a brief list of some of the things that you need to consider. Involvement. This is a crucial part because I'm a firm believer that teachers and staff must be included in the development of a budget. Why? Because they're at the front line. Now, you might need to make a decision where you don't automatically agree with them. But if you're involving them in the discussions, there's a greater sense of ownership. When the budget decisions are made, they know that they have put all the data together for their particular justification of instructional expenses. Don't overlook the importance of the involvement of teachers and staff. Some schools involve parents. Again, that's up to the comfort level you have with your parents' organization. Sometimes people feel very funny about discussing that with parents. Budget calendar. When does the budget process start? Now, if you see here, I've indicated that it would probably start about October 15th. So the budget materials are distributed. Why is that important? Because you need to make sure that those with budget responsibility are given the time to analyze the data, to look at their needs, and also find out what costs would be associated with them. In this calendar, it says November the 12th. So you see about a month there that the budget requests are due to the CFO, business manager, or the president of the school if you're in a high school. It might be to the principal or the pastor in elementary school. And then December 15th to December 3rd, the budget proposals are going to be developed for the board of directors. Now, again, I'm using a high school model here. December 17th, preliminary budget sent to the board of directors so they have a chance to review it. January 10th, the presentation to the board of directors. And during the week of January the 24th, meeting with the Archdiocesan Finance Committee. If you're owned by the diocese, then you generally need to meet with them. So again, you factor that in. Most times tuition needs to be decided, and that letter needs to be sent out to parents by, in my case, let's say the 4th of February. And March 15th, the departments are notified of the approved budgets. So you see the process goes from October 15th all the way to March 15th, a long process. But that's the time when all the hard work is done, especially between that month when budget materials are distributed and the budget requests are submitted to the head of the school. Now, in this particular form, what you see, I used an admissions example from a high school. And what it says is that, well, they're going to have outside printing, and you'll see that there is the line item, the code, ADM001. And these are all the things that go into that, open house, postcard, and mailing of invitations. Now, you'll also see the cost associated with that. And then the other thing is the priority. Is it a high priority, medium priority, low priority? And as you look at this piece, you'll see some things are listed as high. That means we really need to have those. That's what the person that submitted this is saying. Now, as the head of the school, I might go back and say, well, can you explain that? Give me greater justification for that. Budgets take time. They require planning and patience. Remember the mission. Remember the vision. Everything we do in our schools is to enhance the learning process for our students. Our mission is to provide them with the best education in faith and in knowledge. That's what we're trying to do. So as you look at the budget process, look at building a budget. Remember the mission, remember the vision, and then get the supporting documents together that would allow you to have the most successful year that you can possibly have.